which, folks, the recording is running right now. So let me move myself to the top of the screen for the purpose of the recording. So you're very welcome. On the session today, we're going to look at a topic that always gets people's attention, and that is the topic of charisma. And for all of the reasons that you'll understand, because after all, you did sign up to this session. And it never fails to fascinate people. And we're going to demystify it a little bit and show you basically by the end of this session what it is you specifically can start doing right away that will take no great amount of effort, that will start to change the impact you have on people, will start to give you what would traditionally be described as a more charismatic impact. So this is a very practical session, and we're going to give you some very practical tips at the end of it. So you're going to need during this session a pen and paper. So please, while I'm doing the introductory comments, if you don't have a pen and paper to hand, please grab one, because I promise you, you're going to get much better return on your participation if you work through some of the simple exercises that we do with us during the session, as opposed to just spectate. Now, let me ask just to check this out. I think Aoife mentioned about the show of hands feature. There's a facility there that allows you to put your hand up. Let me ask you, how many people on the call here today ever have cause to make presentations to other people, either live or online? Put your hand up if you ever do that. Yeah, so pretty much all of the hands are going up, and I'm doing that because I want to get you get a little bit of empathy from you, because I want you to imagine that you're in a session and you ask for people to interact and nothing happens, and often that happens because everybody thinks somebody else will do it, and somebody else will respond. What I'm begging you, please, is don't leave me swinging in the wind. I'm going to need some input from you during the session. Not a huge amount. It's not a huge amount of work. But I'm going to need some input just to make this more valuable from everybody, because of the usefulness of getting feedback from a larger crowd of people as we go through. So please participate as much as you can in the session. This is me. This is the wonderful guy that I am. I am not going to bore you with the detail of all the wonderful things I am. I just want to tell you that this is who I work with. And that's Genos International. We're a multi-award-winning emotional intelligence assessment solution provider. And most of the way we go to market is through certified emotional intelligence practitioners, so people who go through our certification program, who are either in-house people, coaches, consultants, trainers, in-house delivering to their in-house teams, or independent coaches, consultants, and trainers who integrate what we do into what they do. And we've been doing that since 2002. So we've certified about 7,500 people worldwide. From a credibility point of view, you can look to the left-hand side. On the bottom is a little-known logo from something called the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. And that's Daniel Goleman's organization that he established specifically to identify those organizations in the EI world who had good credibility, who had sufficiently deep research, enough peer-reviewed case studies, and enough numbers to be able to prove that what they did worked. Because when the whole emotional intelligence thing started back in the late 90s, a lot of cowboys piled into it with no research and tools that just simply didn't work. We are one of the founder members of the consortium, and we're approved by them. Back up the top, you can see that last 2 years, we've been one of the top 20 assessment companies in the world. Not just top 20 emotional intelligence assessment companies, but the top 20 assessment companies in the world. And I say all that and the fact that we're an ICF business partner so that you know you're dealing with somebody who has deep credibility. You can find more on the website if you want to find that. And we bring that credibility to bear. We genuinely want to make a dent on the world. I think it was Steve Jobs who said that his objective was to make a dent in the universe. Well, we want to make a dent in the working place universe. And we want to help to create workplaces that are populated by people who are conscious of those people around them, who adapt their behaviors to show up in an emotionally intelligent way, being considerate and empathetic, and where there's an emphasis on keeping stress low and optimism and enthusiasm high. And that's the purpose that we put together year before last, when we said, what do we want to leave behind, if you like? Now, we are not saint-like in that we're like every commercial organization. Obviously, for our shareholders, we have to turn a profit. But having said that, we believe enough in this purpose that we also invest in making this happen into programs where there is no return for us, where there is no, where we don't charge. We call them our social responsibility programs. And if you haven't been on one of these before, let me tell you what we've done this year, because the little red asterisk there tells you, if you didn't see or hear about these programs before and didn't attend them, that you still can, because after we ran them, we set them up in self-paced versions. And Aoife is going to send you a link so you can sign up to any of those that you didn't sign up to. So we did an 8-week mindfulness program, mindful leader program. We did a 4-week mindful and emotionally intelligence mindful and emotionally intelligent salesperson program. And we did a really well-received emotional intelligence and neuroscience masterclass. And they were offered at no cost to the world. It's about educating people to create those sort of workplaces we were talking about. And we have a program running right up into 2020, just to let you know. In the last quarter of this year, we run a program which I think is going to be an absolute humdinger. It is designed to help people who attend it to be ready to make 2020 the best year of their business and personal lives. It's called Do You Know Where You're Going To? It will run over 4 weekly sessions, and we produced a special app that we'll be giving away to participants in that program at no cost to help them clarify their personal vision, build an awareness of how they are going about achieving that personal vision, build the resilience to deal with the setbacks and the stress that comes from chasing after it, and build a certain amount of joy and happiness through recognizing what it is in their lives that's really going well, that's worthy of being grateful for. And we're going to start mailing out the invitations for that tomorrow, September 5th, and it starts during October. In Q1 2020, we're doing a 4-week program called Building the Resilience to Thrive in a Frantic World. And it'll be about building stress resistance and resilience. And then in Q20, one of my personal favorites, we're going to be doing one that's got a lot of new research on it called The Buying Brain. And it'll be the neuroscience and emotional intelligence of sales and marketing. So today is, of course, becoming more charismatic. And it's the role of emotional intelligence in that whole process. And I think you're going to be fascinated by the way that the research on charisma and the research on emotional intelligence has intersected in a way that makes it possible for you and anybody else who cares to make a decision during this session today to change some small thing about the way they behave and to change the level of charismatic impact that they have on other people. So without further ado, let me dive into this. So let me ask you, or no, let me not ask you, let me say to you, that I know that unless you live on the dark side of the moon or you live on a desert island in the middle of nowhere with no communication on your own, well then being able to engage people is a large part of your success. Now, if you're a leader, that's obvious because your job is to inspire others and to engage them so that they want to do the best they can for you and their organization. If you're an individual contributor or you're not a leader or a manager, well then the connection may be less obvious, except think about it. Day in, day out, don't you have to persuade people, convince people, bring people to your point of view, get them to share your opinion, get them to cooperate with you in order to be successful. That's engagement. So what we're going to talk a lot about today is how do you go about engaging people the way charismatic people do? Because charismatic people are the ultimate engagers, and we'll talk about that as we move through the session. But first, let me ask you, and I'll ask Aoife to put all the hands down that are up there right now, and I'm just going to ask you, do you? Here we go. Do you know anybody in your life, present or past, who, when they walk into a room, suck the energy out of the room. They plunge the atmosphere negative, and they take all the positivity out of the room. They basically suck the life out of it. Yeah, and I see hands going up all over the place. In fact, if I wait long enough, I'll bet you all the hands will go up there. Yeah, we all know somebody like that. An ex-boss of mine used to call them psychic vampires. They live only to suck the positivity out of a room. So let's imagine you're in a room where somebody like that has had their influence and they're kind of a bit of a downer. Do you know anybody who, if they walked into that room and started interacting with the people in that room, would have the opposite effect, would start to raise the positivity in that room? So Aoife, put the hands down and let's put them back up again. And so tell me, do you know anybody who would?
Sorry, Deiric, I was just sharing. I don't have that capability at the moment, so you might just have to click that yourself there.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's my fault. Just give us a second, folks. I am going to put, here we go, Aoife. So, and now you do. Sorry about that, folks. So just get you to Juja. Yeah, so I was saying, do you know anybody who, when they walk into a room, actually light it up? They make it a better place to be. You think, this is going to be good. This is better. And despite the fact that somebody has plunged the temperature down low and it's cold, that you kind of see the sun come out and you think there's still some potential for some fun, for some positivity here. And all the hands went up. We all know people like that. Well, you know, the sort of people that we're talking about today, charismatic people, are like the latter. They're the sort of people who make people feel good, who light them up, who make them feel positive, and who engage them because of that. Now, when the world economy ran over a cliff in 2010, all of our clients were saying to us, Deiric, we're not expanding, we're not taking on any more people. In fact, we're losing some people in a lot of cases, and we're not investing any more money. What we need is to get more engagement from people that we already have so that we get better results, because during these tough times, we just have to get better results from the people that we have. And so we started a study to figure out, what is it that leaders who are particularly engaging, those people who, when they walk into a room, they light the place up and they make people want to engage, what is it that they shared in common? And when we started the research, which ended up in being one of the largest studies, in fact, the largest study ever done on charisma, when we started that study, we started with some very simple bench research. So we went on to Google. And what we were looking for was people in the business world, the political world, the social world, the entertainment world, who had a particular name for being particularly engaging. And we looked at 30 plus people. In the book, which you're getting a copy of at the end of this, that you can read on your Kindle or your mobile device, we looked at more than 30 of those. And we were trying to figure out, what is it that they shared in common? You know, because there was this common perception that you're either engaging or you're not. And we'll answer the question as to whether that's the case or not. And these are just examples of a couple of people who in really diverse fields would be regarded as engaging. But what we found was, when we went on looking for people who are paragons of engagement, who are examples of really great engagers, there was a word that was used more often than engagement, and that was charisma. Very often, people who are really capable of engaging people really effectively were given the label charisma. Now, charisma is a very interesting label. And it's an interesting label because it comes from the Greek root charism. And charism in Greek means a God-given gift. You go back to the days of the original Greek Empire, and at a time when they saw leaders who had a particular ability to inspire and engage and enthuse people, and when they couldn't figure out what it was that they were doing that made them so capable of doing so, they decided, it must be a God-given gift. It must be something that they were given by God that nobody else has. And that's the root of charisma. That is the God-given gift. The implication is that somebody who's charismatic has it from birth, and if you don't have it, you're never going to have it. And so we changed our direction on the research, and we decided to research we decided to research charisma as applied to leadership. And at that time, we did the biggest research study ever done in the area. Because the people I was working with at the time, Profiles International, had an online system that spanned the world, we were able to have 40,000 leaders approximately reviewed for their charisma and for their general behaviors by about 40,000 people that reported them. And they were basically rating how charismatic do they find the individual and what do they see them do day to day. And our objective was to figure out, is it a God-given gift or is it a function of behavior? And I'm going to hold you in suspense until later on to tell you what we found. Before we do that, what I want to do is give you some kind of a flavor of the way that research went, a very, very light-hearted flavor of it. So I'm going to ask you to think of the most engaging boss that you ever worked for. And in the chat box, I'm going to ask you to put up a rating of how engaged you were with them. 1, 2, 3 was they had no effect on me whatsoever. Anything I did it because it's who I am. 8, 9, 10 is I would have run off a cliff for them. They got the best you could possibly get out of me. And, 4, 5, 6, 7 is kind of average. It's kind of, meh. Nobody, average charisma is average. So tell me, thinking of your most, the most engaging boss, how engaged were you with them? So we got 10s, we got 9s, 10, 10, 9, 9. Okay, I think we're starting to see a pattern that's going up and down there. So the most engaging boss you ever had, and God bless you, there are some people who the most engaging boss they ever had was pretty unengaging. Most of you seem to have had a really positive experience there. And I'm glad for that, because we should all experience that at least once in our lives, because they can become our role models. Let's go to the dark side. Thinking of the least engaging boss you ever had, how would you rate your engagement on them? 1, 2, 3, completely disengaged. 8, 9, 10, and then in the middle, meh. And we got a 1, we got a 2, we got a 1. Anybody else? We got a 7. That's not too bad. A 3, a 2, a -2. And we had a -5 by the way this morning. So the main thing I want you to notice is, if we go back through that chat, if we were to add all together all of the ratings on the most engaging boss, well, then we'd see that the average is somewhere around 7 or 8. If we were to add up the ratings on the least engaging boss, it's probably down around 2 or 3. So they're very, very different impacts. And I suspect that the reason that you're on this call is not so that you can learn to be like this guy, but so that you can learn to be like the first guy, the person who got that engaging impact, okay? So let's look at some of the things that were different between the first boss and the second boss. And the most important one you'll see as we work through here is how they made you feel. So do me a favor, think of the most engaging boss you ever worked for once again, and into the chat box, enter 3 words that describe the way that person made you feel. If they made you feel sad, depressed, and down, put that in. If they made you feel happy, put that in, whatever. So I've got valued, I've got energized, I've got inspired, energized, valued, able, appreciated, inspired, appreciated, valued, connected, empowered, valued, important, challenged, appreciated, trusted. Do you hear the words that are coming out there? The uplifting, inspiring, intelligent, acknowledged. These are exactly the way you want to feel. That person made you feel the way we like to feel: motivated, inspired, trust, acknowledged. And there's a great word from Meta, acknowledged. Let me remind you about that acknowledged, because I'm going to characterize that as seen when we work through this session later on. But listen to those words. If you were lying in a casket at the end of your life and you had the ability from the next life to look back and people were saying these things about you, like, hey, Deiric, he was such a motivating, inspiring, uplifting, intelligent, empowering, etc. leader, I think you'd be pretty happy moving on to the next world. What about Darth Vader, the Darth Vader of your boss world? How did they make you feel? What are the 3 words, the first things that come into your mind when you think about those? cheap, bored, demotivated, disempowered, unappreciated, not valued, negative, demotivated, disrespectful, uninterested, worthless, stressed, worthless, unmotivated, unappreciated, unhappy, uninterested, angry, sad, disrespected, worthless, depressed, holy God, frustrated. Look at all these things. Now, that is not, right now, if you're like a failure, frustrated, if you went back to that person right now and you were able to feed back to them even 3 of those words and you said, this is the way you made me feel, with very few exceptions, if they examined their hearts, they'd say, holy God, what was I doing? What was it I was doing to make people feel that way? What was it I was doing to have if you like, an anti-charismatic impact upon people? Because people whom we regard as charismatic are attractive, magnetic, engaging, and these people seem to be almost through the mirror, if you like, version of that. They're driving you away. Now, what I want you to notice is that there's a very strong correlation between the high numbers in terms of the way that the way you rated the engagement with the most engaging boss you ever worked for, and the way they made you feel. And that's really critical. And I'm going to show you, in fact, that is the crossover point, the intersection point on the Venn diagram when we look at charisma, when we look at emotional intelligence. You're going to see that the crossover point is the way they made you feel. Because, as I've said in so many of these sessions on emotional intelligence, quoting Maya Angelou, people never forget the way you made them feel. Now, Maya Angelou was an activist and a poet and a writer. Let me bring in a scientist onto this. These are 2 researchers. I think they're from Scandinavia, Illes and Bono, and they're just talking about something called emotional contagion. Now, they're talking in a leadership environment, but we're all human. It doesn't matter whether you're a leader or not. Bottom line is that whatever behaviors you bring along, whatever emotions you bring into the room are induced into the people in the room with you. And the more time you spend with people, the more you induce those emotions into them. And this is really important. It's really important to realize that emotions move from person to person faster than the speed of light. I mean, they really do. If you doubt me, look at the way sometimes a peaceful protest can turn really, really ugly just because 1 or 2 people start stirring things up a little bit. They start a little pocket of negative emotion in the corner of a protest, and boom, it wipes right through that protest, and it goes from peaceful to explosive in a few moments. And that's really, really important. It's really important to recognize that emotional contagion is a very real part of the way we are wired. We have a part of our brains that is designed to tune into and pick up on other people's emotions. And that's why I say to you, nobody has charisma. You see, people talk about charisma as if it was a quality or it was an attribute or as if it was a possession, as if it was something you had or I have. And it's not something that you or I have. Charisma is not a thing. It's not an attribute. You don't have it. I don't have it. Charisma is what other people, or we call it, when we like how somebody makes us feel, and we don't have another word for it. If we like the way it feels to be around an individual and we don't have another word for it, charismatic is where we go. Now you think of anybody that you know who in the entertainment world, political world, the business world is regarded as charismatic. Why is it they call them charismatic? Because the people giving them that label like the way they make them feel. And that's really, really important to get that. The charisma is not a God-given gift, or forgive me, if it is a God-given gift, it's a gift that she saw fit to give to us all. It is a gift that involves a choice. And that choice is, how do we want to make people feel? So if you've ever been on any Genos event where we talk about emotional intelligence, you probably heard what I call the mantra. And I think it's This is the single most important sentence in my mind always when I think about what emotional intelligence is, because emotional intelligence is just knowing. It's just knowing that the way we show up, in other words, the way we behave, determines the way people feel. That the way they feel determines the extent to which they can engage, and the extent to which they engage determines everything as an outcome from that relationship. You know, so the way you make people feel is decisive. When we describe or when we talk about people as being charismatic, we talk about them as being people who make the people around them feel good. When we talk about people being emotionally intelligent, we talk about them knowing that the way they show up and the way they make people feel is really critical to everything. And you're starting probably to see what the intersection is, because that's emotional intelligence, but it's also charisma. Understanding that the way you get people engaged, the way you bring people on board is by making them experience the emotions that you experience when you dealt with your most engaging boss. And that's exactly, we spent a lot of time, energy, and money on producing the research that ended up in this book, and of which I think I've already told you, you're getting a copy at the end of this. And it came down, and what it says it in 350 pages, but what it says is a leader's ability to engage is about your behavior. It's about how you make people feel. And it doesn't matter whether you're a leader in the formal sense, or whether you're an opinion leader, or whether you're a parent, or whether you're a friend. The way we make people feel is decisive, and it's a choice. It's not an attribute. It's not something that we have or don't have. It's a choice. We can choose how we behave. But let me tell you, it takes effort, because you've learned, and I've learned, to be who we are over the period of our lives. It's taken us a long time to learn that. Sometimes it takes a little bit of effort to unlearn it. So let me make a really important point here. Charisma and emotional intelligence are two sides of the same coin. Emotional intelligence is knowing that the way I show up is important, knowing that if I adapt my behavior to show up in a way that makes people feel better, that I'll get the best results. That's emotional intelligence. And charisma is how people describe you when they like the way you show up. Emotional intelligence and charisma are two sides of the same coin. There is nothing new here. Bottom line is, what emotional intelligence talks about is a way of understanding how you have to behave in order to get the best results from other people, in order to engage them, in order for them to feel you as magnetic or charismatic or impactful or engaging. And that's really, really critical. Now, two things I want to give you as principles, because later on in the program, after we've done a little bit of science, I'm going to share with you the 6 behaviors that the charisma research and the emotional intelligence research intersect upon as being those behaviors that make most difference in engaging people, makes most difference in having people want to be around you, want to be engaged by you. And at their core, there are 2 things you need to understand from the mindset of somebody who wants to have that sort of impact upon people. And that is really that there are 2 things that motivate people. One of them is with them. I'll talk about that in a moment. And the second is what we called the charismatic equation. Okay, so let me share with you what those are. First off, what's in it for me? The reality is that 99% of the things you do and everybody else does in the world are done because of enlightened self-interest, because there's something in it for us. When somebody says to me, will you engage with me? Will you work a little bit harder? Will you help me to do this? In our minds, even though it might not come out our mouths, maybe sometimes it does, but we think, what's in it for me? What do I get from that? What is it? Because we are programmed all the time to be moving towards that which we find pleasurable, moving away from that we find painful or unpleasant. And all of our behavior is informed by this. In fact, even the most altruistic person you ever heard of, Mother Teresa would be a nice example. Nelson Mandela would be another example. And you think of, let's take Mother Teresa, who gave her entire life over to working with the people in the slums of Calcutta. And you say, Deiric, how can you say that she was looking at what's in it for her? But that lady was born with a vocation. She had a need. She had a part of her that said, I need to help people out of pain. I need to help people out of suffering. And I won't be happy until I help people out of suffering. You think about it, that vocation, that drive, that deep empathy that is what drove her. What was in it for her was that deep sense of satisfaction that I'm making a difference in the world, that I'm helping these folks. Everything we do is informed by that. And what that means is you need to be aware all the time you are less important than everybody else, particularly those people you want to interact with. You really do need continually to be saying, what's in it for them? Why should they do this? Why should they be motivated to engage with me? What can I bring to their lives? You need to become genuinely compassionate, genuinely empathetic, genuinely tuned into their perspective. So that's the first thing. And you'll see that reflected in the behaviors and the guidance that I give as we go through this session. And the second thing is what we called at the time the charismatic equation. We looked at all this research and we were trying to figure out how do we put all this research into a single line. And at the time, we used a different version to Maya Angelou. We said the extent to which people perceive you as being charismatic is directly proportional to the extent to which they either feel or do better after each interaction with you. If I deal with you and I walk away from that feeling a little bit better about myself, or a little bit more able because you've helped me with a difficult situation, a little bit more able to cope, or I feel a little bit more secure, I feel a little bit more positive, I feel a little bit more, it doesn't matter. If I walk away from most of the interactions with you, net positive, I start to want to spend more time with you. If I want to spend more time with you and you continually enhance the way we deal together so that it's a positive experience, you become, to me, engaging. You become what traditionally was called charismatic. So we can't overplay, and I'll talk about it when we get into the next session, you cannot overplay the importance of positivity. Nobody needs any more negativity in their life. Nobody needs anybody like the least inspiring boss or engaging boss you ever had. We want to be around the most engaging boss you ever had and people like that. So we need to recognize that the way we show up and how positive we are in the way we show up has a big impact. Now, some of you have been on sessions before, some of you haven't. I want to do a version of the neuroscience of emotions as it applies to charisma, because I think it's really, really important that we get that connection. And you may wonder what that's all about. Well, what I'm going to do is this. Ah! Okay. Now, let me just have a show of hands, if I may. Did anybody get a fright there? I'm kind of hoping you did, but put your hand up if you got a fright. Yeah, let me see. Have we any hands? Yeah, a couple of hands going up. Yeah, slowly but surely. So yeah, the idea, I didn't do it just for the fun, although there was for me a certain amount of fun in it. What I did was to try and stimulate the emotional part of your brain into action. And to make a point that about this really primitive and ancient part of your brain. Bottom line, one of the earliest parts of the brain to develop is the emotional brain. It was designed to keep you alive. It was designed to detect threats in the environment around you. So when I screamed at you, by the way, the human scream is one of the most triggering sounds for us as humans. From our development, as humans, we have come to be triggered really strongly by the screams of other humans. And because that scream really got your emotional brain ringing, okay? Every single thing that's said to you, every thought you have, every experience that you have, every idea you take from the outside world, every attitude and thought that you have about something you read or you experience is filtered as a stimulus in the first instance into the emotional brain. The emotional brain has only two labels that it puts on everything. It's either good or it's bad. It's a reward or it's threat. It's positive or negative. It's totally binary. So it will decide that something or somebody that you're interacting with is either a threat or it's a reward situation. And in the threat situation, the emotional brain was designed to override the thinking brain and get you running like hell or ready to fight like hell in that threat situation. And when there was an existential threat like wild animals or whatever from our ancient history, that was very, very appropriate. Well, what's kind of interesting is this is now triggered by lots of non-existential threats. So we can be triggered by things that people say, thoughts that come into our mind, things that we see on the TV, things that we read in the paper, and things that the people that we deal with do to us or do with us. And when we're triggered into that danger threat or that danger mindset, we immediately start to disengage. We start to close off and we start to protect ourselves. If we can't run away physically, we certainly run away mentally. That's what you did with your least engaging boss. They made you feel threatened. They were a source of danger in your world. They caused you to disengage. And that had a dramatic impact upon things. Because any of the stimuli that make you feel threatened are ultimately passed on to the thinking brain. And the thinking brain does an awful lot of processing around it. But remember, every message arrives in from the outside with a bias already on it. And that is, this is either a threat or it's a reward situation. And if it's a threat situation, well, that changes entirely the way you feel, the way you think, the decisions you make, and the way you engage with people. And if I ask you, just very quickly, again, show of hands, Aoife, if you can take those hands down for me, would be great. And, or can you? You can, good. Let me ask for a show of hands. Did you ever meet somebody for the very first time, and for no good reason, you decided you didn't like them? Put your hands up. And you know what happens in that situation? And try and watch it the next time. It's an unconscious bias. Something in your emotional brain has reacted negatively to that person. Something in the way they talk, the way they move, something that they remind you of. God knows what it was, but that triggered your emotional brain and you thought, don't like this guy. Okay? And from that moment forward, when that message was passed forward to the thinking brain goes working, we don't like this guy. I wonder why, and starts collecting evidence for that. Okay. Now, let me ask you again, have you ever met somebody, and again, you're meeting them for the first time, and you've no good reason to feel that way, but you think, this is a nice person, I like this person, I think I could spend time around them. Yeah, again, your emotional brain. Your emotional brain has been triggered into a reward sort of situation. Whether somebody smiles or not, whether they make eye contact with you or not, their body language, the way they speak with you, your tone of voice, all of these subtleties have an impact upon how the emotional brain reacts. But here's the key thing that you need to know. The emotional brain reacts all the time to everything that happens to you in your world. Okay? So you don't have to be under a life-threatening situation. You can be triggered into that threat response by somebody putting you down, diminishing your approval, demeaning your status, making you fearful that you're going to be tricked, taking away your security, your lack of control, being unfair, etc. All of those cause that danger response. And I dare say that all of those characterize the experience you had with that least engaging boss ever. So when you're getting a diet like that is being fed in through the emotional brain that's continually saying, don't like this person, don't like this person, over time you're closing off, disengaging. It's not that you even want to disengage. It's that you have no choice because that's the way you're wired. That's the way your brain operates. And you can be doing a job you absolutely love. And if you're working for a tyrant who has you under tremendous stress, you can't give your best. Doesn't matter how much you want to, you simply can't. Now, if we look at the other side and we say, what about the person who turns up and builds your trust and shows you trust and gives you certainty and consistency and reliability and approval and a sense of belonging and all those sorts of things that I'm expecting that you got from your most engaging boss? Well, then that tips our brain into reward mode. And you know what the brain says? The brain then says, what's all the reasons that we feel engaged with this person? What are all the reasons we should open up to this person? What are all the reasons we should move towards this person? That's the way you're wired. Now, if you can afford to wait around for another couple 100,000 years, maybe that will change. Maybe we may all be part machine 100,000 years from now. Who knows? But right now, you have to work with a brain that's a lot of millions. I think it's 400 billion years old, but a lot of millions of years old. And the way that works, according to one of the most prominent neurosurgeons in this area, Gordon, is that your brain is a certainty-seeking machine, and its determination, its core mission is to minimize danger and maximize rewards. It is to move away from threat responses by disengaging. And if it can't physically move away, to pull away, to withdraw, to disengage, and to move towards the response, or move towards those who engender a reward responsiveness. Now, there's where the intersection is between charismatic people. Charismatic people make you want to move towards them. They make you want to engage with them. Non-charismatic and non-emotionally intelligent people do the opposite. So emotional intelligence is just, how do you show up in order to get people in a mindset where they feel they can engage with you? Charisma is what they say about you when they have engaged with you. Now, here's one of the big challenges. The world is more stressed than it ever has been in its history. And you're more stressed than your parents, and I dare say your parents are more stressed than they were, and your kids are going to be more stressed than you. That's what the trend seems to be. In the Wall Street Journal 4 or 5 weeks ago, there was an article that said that the current crop of new young people coming to the workplace in their 23 and 24, 20 to 25 age group are the most anxious and stressed generation ever. And there is an epidemic, particularly among young folk. Now, what that means from your point of view is the people are already arriving in front of you, and they're already turned off, stressed, and disengaged by the experiences they've had from looking at their phones, from hearing the news, from interacting with other colleagues, etc. So to get them back into a place where they can be engaged, to get them back into a place where you can have a positive impact upon them, you have to work that a little bit harder. And that's why I said earlier on, 4, 5, 6, 7 on that scale of engaging is yeah, because that's the effect it has. Yeah, it has negligible effect. You have to be that little bit better than the average. Now, one of the really nice things about all the research, it was really clear. Charisma is as charisma does. There used to be an expression that says love is as love does, or people often said love is not a noun, it's a verb. It doesn't matter how you put it. The bottom line is, if you want to be perceived as being charismatic, if you want to be perceived as being engaging, you have to behave in a way that is engaging. And that means showing up with a set of behaviors that are designed to turn off the threat mechanism in people's brains and really bring them closer. Now, I'm going to share with you 6 behaviors. Well, the first one's not really so much a behavior as an attitude of mind, if you like, that informs all of the other behaviors. And that's the number 1. And then for the last 5, I'm going to share with you very specific things that you can actually do to start changing your impact today. And I'm serious, they're really easy. You could do it immediately after this session today. Here's what I suggest to you. Because the research says that your brain can hold a maximum of 7 ideas at any given point in time. That's 7, I think it was 7 plus or minus 2 is what they said. But here's the bottom line. Don't try to walk out of this session saying there's 6 new things that I'm going to do, that I'm going to change about the way I show up, because you're dooming yourself to failure. Because there's just too much else that you have to attend to in the world outside. What you should do as we work through this session is listen to these behaviors, listen to these ideas, listen to these approaches, and say, which 1 or 2 feel right for me? Which 1 or 2 fit me? Which 1 or 2 feel authentic and appropriate for me? And then at the end of it, I'm going to ask you to make a commitment to yourself, to set an intention to actually go out into the world slightly differently with a slightly different way of showing up. Even if it's only one behavior, you change anything about the way you show up to people, and you change everything about the way you show up to people. So let's dive into these specific behaviors. The first thing, and you've heard it ad nauseum up to this point, positivity cannot be overstressed. This is a graph that I put together that combines research from 3 researchers. Unfortunately, the third researcher is mathematics. A couple of years ago, a guy called Marcial Losada, his mathematics were undermined. They were found to be a little bit faulty. And so, as often happens in the academic world, they threw out the baby with the bathwater, and they said none of his research was any good. So I focused it back to 2 people, Barbara Fredrickson and John Gottman. And here's what they essentially focused on. They say that in any human relationship, either between 2 humans, or between a human and a group, or between a human and an organization, or between a human and a work environment, there must be, for that human, 3 to 5 times more positive experiences than negative experiences in order for them to be able to engage. And they say that if you've got a ratio that is less than 3 to 1 positive to negative experiences, if it's a workplace relation or a workplace environment, for example, where people get more negative than positive messages, creativity dies, relationships break down, productivity dives, engagement is dead. It's what one of those researchers used to refer to as the languishing zone. When you go above 3 to 1, or according to one of the other researchers, a man called Gottman, above 5 to 1, well, then you get people to a stage where they start to, if they have 3 to 5 times more positive experiences with you or the workplace, they start to thrive. Relationships start to light up. Things warm up. Engagement rises. People work in flow, and productivity rises. So if you want to engage people, you have to have a determination. You have to have an intention in the back of your mind that says, I'm going to determine that the experiences that people have with me are going to be net positive. And they're going to have more positive interactions with me than they are negative. And you know what? If you're the boss, sometimes you have to have negative interactions. Sometimes you have to discipline people, or say no, or say something that might be perceived as negative. That means that you just have to work harder to bring more positive experiences into the mix. And if you doubt me, listen to the story about this man, Gottman. Gottman is a researcher on relationships, particularly committed relationships, and the positivity-negativity ratio. Let me scare you a little bit. He can take you into a room with your significant other, your husband, your wife, your partner, whatever, that you've been committed to for a long time. And in a 90-minute interview, he can gather enough information to be able to predict with uncanny statistical accuracy whether that relationship will survive or not. It's crazy. It seems crazy, but the research has been going on for many years. What he does, very simply, is in that interview, when he's talking to you, he's scoring the number of positive versus negative interactions. He's looking at body language, facial expressions, tone of language, things that are said, attitudes to one another, and so on and so forth. And he comes up with an overall score. And if it's below a certain threshold, he can say with confidence that relationship's not going to survive. Now, you want to bring it back to your life. Let me ask you, have you ever, let's have a show of hands just to make sure you're still there. Have you ever done anything, come on, be honest, have you ever done anything that has upset your significant other, your loved one, your partner, your husband, your wife? Doesn't have to be. Yeah, no hesitations on the hands gone up. So everybody's done that, yeah. Well, let's say, for example, let's take a silly example. But, you know, it's a silly example that comes from real life, I think, for a lot of us, is if you, let's say you forget an important birthday or an important anniversary or something that's really meaningful to your partner. So basically, they've had a negative experience with you. They've had an interaction with you that just didn't feel good. Now, let me tell you, put your hand up, okay, when I get to the count of positive experiences you think it takes before you're back in the good books. Is it one positive experience? If you do one thing positive, does it offset that? What about if you do 2 things positive? What about if you do 3 things positive? Okay. Bottom line is, when you fall out, when you do something like that, when you offend against somebody like that in a relationship, it takes many more positive interactions to overcome the impact of that negative interaction. And that's simply because of our chemistry. We have been bred, we are basically descendants of nervous monkeys. We are inclined to pay more attention to negative events than positive events. But here's the key point I want to make to you. If you're serious that you want to influence people, if you're serious you want to engage with them, well, then you need the mindset. You need the mindset that says, I need to be making sure all the time that the way I interact with people, as much as is practically possible, keeps them in that flourishing zone. In other words, keeps 3 to 5 more positive versus negative experiences. And the next 5 behaviors are going to tell you how you do that. And it's simple. It's easy. It's just human relations principles that Dale Carnegie might have called them. So let's start with this one. One of the most important things, if the way you show up determines the way people feel, you really need to know, how do I show up right now? That's why we offered you an opportunity to do the emotional intelligence assessment, because it tells you how the people around you see you show up right now. But let me give you I said I'd give you some simple things to do. Let me give you one simple thing that you're going to be able to really change the way you impact people. Now, again, do me a favor. Please don't passively interact with this part of the exercise, okay? I'm going to ask you to grab that pen and paper, okay? And get the pen in your hand. I'm only going to give you probably a minute and a half just for an exercise. And in a moment, I'm going to put a prompt up onto the screen, okay? And what I'd like you to do when you put that prompt up is write it down onto your page. And the prompt is, when I am my best self, I am. So please, while I'm giving the rest of the instructions, just write down, when I am my best self, when I'm the best example of who I am and who I want to show up to be, I am. And get that down on your paper. And when I say go, I'm going to give you, let's say, 2 minutes of silence just to start writing. Now, don't start yet, because let me just give you one rule. And that is, once you start writing, don't stop to think. Don't get the grammar correct. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about punctuation. Just let it flow. And what you want to have flow out of you is, what does your best self, what does the best version of you look like when you show up as your best self? So I'm giving you 2 minutes starting now. By the way, if in the middle of it you run out of things to say, write down the prompt again and just keep doing that until you've come up with something else to say. So I'm starting the clock, and I'll ring the bell at the end of 2 minutes. So start. When I am my best self, I am. So start writing. Okay, 1 more minute, and I'll ring the bell. 30 more seconds. Just keep the pen moving. Okay. So that is 2 minutes. So here's what's really important. You need to know there are some things that you do better than anybody else. There are parts of you and your best self that is so unique and so authentic that you need to know, what does that look like? One of the best ways of getting to that, and you can have a look over what you've written while I continue just to chat here for a moment, is one of the best ways is using that sort of journaling approach and just letting it flow out of you. And what I'd suggest is that you do that once or twice again, a day or two apart. And just, here's what my best self looks like. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, here's how I'd like to be seen. Here's the way I want my best self to be remembered. Here's what I want to leave behind every time I interact with somebody. And once you've done that once or twice, you'll have a really clear idea of, wow, this is who my best self is. And that's, first off, I guarantee you, you don't have a clear enough idea of what that is right now. You really don't. None of us do. We need to continually remind ourselves, because of our negativity bias, all of the good things about ourselves. And then after you've done that a couple of times, you've got a picture that says, this is pretty much who I am, my best day. Ask your significant other. Ask those you love and those you care for and those you trust, what do I look like on my best day? What do you value in me on my best day? And adapt that. And get yourself to a stage where there's a couple of lines that says, here is the best version of me. Because that's the way you want to be showing up. Because when you create a version of the best self, best part of yourself, and you say, I'm setting an intention to become this person, I'm setting this intention to show up as my best self more often, you set off a whole process in your brain that starts looking for opportunities to do that. So you put together, here's my best self, and then you say, here's the way I want to show up. So look at that description of who is your best self. Know what it is, set the intent to show up, and then when you realize afterwards, as you will, lots and lots of times, that you didn't do it, well, then you don't beat yourself up. You just say, okay, that happens, and next time I'll do it better. That one approach will dramatically raise your self-awareness, will dramatically raise your self-esteem because you're looking at the best things about you, will allow you to show up to people where you're your best self authentically. But here's the really critical thing. It's going to change dramatically the impact you have on other people. You're showing up as the best version of yourself. So that's the first thing. There's a very simple technique. If that appeals, maybe that's the takeaway. Here's another one. You need to make other people feel valued. Remember what we said. The charismatic equation. The extent to which other people feel you charismatic is the extent to which they feel more positive after every interaction with you. In the Northern Natal in South Africa, there are some tribes who have a greeting which the approximate version of what English speakers would use as hello. And with apologies, I see there are a couple of South Africans on the line, and I want to apologize for my Zulu pronunciation. It's going to be pretty dreadful, I expect. But what they say basically is sawubona, okay? And sawubona is used in the same situation as we use hello, but it has a much deeper meaning. What it means, literally translated, is I see you. I see you, you're there, I recognize you, you're here on front of me. And the traditional response to that is sikona, which is, I am here, okay? And the general gist, the general input, the general spirit is, I see you, and until you see me, I do not exist. And I want you to think of the last time you felt not seen. I was on a retreat last week, and the teacher on that retreat told me that he was in a country with his wife where they were both delivering a retreat. And it was a country where there was much more attention paid to males than there was to females. And so as the program was going on, people were coming up and they were saying, the program is going fantastic, Bob. What are we going to do next? His wife was sitting here, he was here. And they addressed his wife, or they addressed him specifically, and just ignored her. Didn't see her, didn't recognize her. How do you think she felt? How did you ever feel when you felt unseen by the people around you? So we need not just to appreciate the people around us, We need to make them feel seen. Meta said, in the words, one of the words she used to describe the way her most engaging boss made her feel, she said he or she made her feel acknowledged, made her feel seen. We do not exist until others see us. We can see it or have seen us. We can see it as a fault in our psychology, but it's what we have to work with. Now, how do you go about seeing people? Do you know it's really easy? You harness your humanity. We mentioned emotional contagion earlier on today, or earlier on in this session. And I said to you that we are programmed to be able to tune in and feel the emotions that other people are experiencing. It happens by something called emotional contagion. And there are parts of the brain, the insula is one of the big parts, that allow us to do that. And the speculation is that in our development, that came before we had verbal capabilities, because it allowed us, when we met somebody, to discern something of their intentions and their emotions towards us just by looking at their by their face, the way they're holding themselves, the tone of voice, and so on. And you still have that ability. Sometimes when you meet somebody, you just feel, oh God, there's a real wave of sadness coming here. And the only reason that we don't tend to use that is we don't think of it. We don't pay attention. Imagine what it would be like if you decided each time you were going to meet somebody that you were going to tune into what you're feeling coming from them. So instead of saying, hi, how are you? And let's face it, when people mostly say, hi, how are you? They don't really mean, tell me, how are you? They don't care. Most of us say that, just as a throwaway line. But what if you were to make somebody feel altogether more seen and to let them know that you've seen them? What if you were to set the intent as you walked up to people that I'm going to take a beat as I'm walking up to somebody to shake their hands or say hi to them, to try and feel into and sense into what they're feeling. And then to put a name on it. So, hey, Meta, hi, how are you? You seem a little distracted. Is there anything I can help with? Or it might be, wow, Aoife, you're looking pretty satisfied with yourself. What did I miss? And we have so much ability to understand non-verbally what people are experiencing. And you know what? If we get it wrong, it doesn't matter. Because if you walk up to somebody and say, hi, how are you? You seem a little distracted. Is there anything I can help with? And they say, no, I'm really not. You've just shown them that you care. You've let them know that you've seen them. You have just changed the tenor of that relationship dramatically. Let me tell you, the impact of doing this simple exercise as you're walking up to people, which is just taking a beat, setting the intention to tune into how they're feeling and putting a name on it, has a dramatic impact. This is something you can start doing immediately after this session. Another thing you can start doing is just recognize people. This is as old as the hills and as old as the oldest management book you ever read. If you want to engage people, you need to make them feel recognized. And I just thought it'd be useful for you to see a little bit about why does this happen. When you give somebody recognition for something they've done well, when you catch them doing something and you say to them, good job, and you give them evidence for it, and that's important, I'll come back to that, you cause an injection of dopamine, which is a hormone into their brain. Dopamine makes them feel pride, makes them feel pleasure, and it motivates them to get into action, to get more or to do more of whatever it was that gave them that shot of dopamine. That's why when we eat, that's why chocolate and running and sex and drugs are so addictive, because they all give us a shot of dopamine. And so when we give somebody feedback and we say to them, if I thought you did a great job with that webinar, that's kind of, yeah. But if you say, if I think you did a great job with that webinar, and the reason I say that is, and you give them good solid evidence for the feedback and the recognition you're giving to them, their brain knows the difference. They get that injection of dopamine. And guess what? You just became more charismatic from their point of view. You just became somebody with whom they have positive experiences. Your boss, your most inspiring and engaging boss, was somebody who caused your brain to exude dopamine on a regular basis by making you feel proud and recognized and acknowledged and so on and so forth. So there are either of both of those will work. But here's what I'd say to you. This is one that you can try right away. And all you have to do is tune into what it is to be human. So does that feel like the one that you take away from this? If not, let's try this one. We all hate fakes. We all hate fakes. We do not engage with people we don't trust. And trust is authenticity. And trust and authenticity is knowing that the person that's showing up to you is real. They are the real deal. They're a genuine diamond, a genuine jewel, not a fake, not a knockoff. And that's really a function of behavior. There are a couple of things that you can do that will make a real difference. And this is, for some people, this is a fundamental change, because sometimes we can build a lifetime habit of people pleasing. And so when somebody says, do you think that's a good idea? Yeah, I do. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think you should go with that. And as you're walking out the door, they're going, bullshit. Because you never really bought into it at all. And people see that, particularly over time, that there's an inconsistency between the things that you say and the things that you do. So being reliable, being consistent, that's what makes a great parent. It's what makes a great boss. It's what makes a great friend. It's what makes a great spouse. It's that knowledge that what they're saying to me, the way or the messages I'm getting from them are absolutely genuine. And the second dimension on authenticity, which is so easy, and we have to be so protective of it, particularly in a world where we're sometimes forced into a situation where we might not be inclined to do so, and that is we need to keep our promises. We make a commitment, we need to keep to that commitment. Or as Paul Zak is the guy who has done all of the neuroscience research on trust. It's a great book, by the way, Trust Factor. He talks about the research on it and what goes on in your brain when you trust people. But he put it perfectly. He said, a person is trustworthy and authentic if they either complete what they promise, or if it can't be done, they let you know that it can't be done so you can make other arrangements. So I would argue that this is not even so much a behavior as an attitude of mind. And sometimes with the best will in the world, I have been guilty of being inauthentic. And I've been guilty of being inauthentic because I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And so I will agree with an opinion or an idea or a suggestion because I don't want to upset them. And then I'll go away and I act differently. How do you think that impacts people? So authenticity is critically important. Last two that I want to share with you. Again, you notice this be seen. I said love is what love does. It is not enough to recognize other people's stake in situations. You must also let them know that you recognize them. And what I mean by that is when you're making decisions that in some way involve people around you, when you're making determinations with people that some way involve them, you are going to impact their lives, you need to involve them. Let me ask you, here's a show of hands situation again. Has anybody ever made a decision on something that dramatically impacted any aspect of your life without asking you about it? Give me a show of hands if they did. Yeah, everybody. That's horrible because I don't even have to ask for words on the feedback there to know that what you felt was cheated, undermined, negative, depressed, down. There are lots of reasons, are lots of ways that we feel. And bottom line is, when we're making decisions, when we're doing things that impact other people, we have to be sure that we at least let them know what's going on. We need to know what's important to them. And that means listening. And by the way, you'll read in the book, when you get the copy of Leadership Charisma, you'll read that our research, remember, 400,000 people feeding back on 40,000 leaders, showed that 40% of charisma was the ability to demonstrate that you were listening. So you can already have that positive impact upon people just by listening. And when you listen to people, they feel good. When they feel good, they want to be around you more. When you listen to them more, and so on and so forth. Think of what people say about the most charismatic people you know. They listen. And they listen because it's important to them to know what's important to you. So if you want to make sure that you keep people on side all the time, well, then you have to set an intention, a determination that any time that I'm making a decision or doing anything that's going to influence others, I have to involve them, consult with them, or at least explain to them. And there are situations where sometimes you have to make a decision, and it's your decision, and it's tough, and it's going to upset somebody else. At least explain the thinking behind it, because we are all emotional beings, and we need to know that some things that are relatively unimportant to us can have a dramatically huge impact on other people. The final thing I would say is that in terms of charismatic people, right now the world is full of headless chickens. And people are so stressed out that you're seeing more and more people either breaking down in work or acting out at work, exploding, losing the head. And when things go wrong, basically going wrong with them. We, through emotional contagion, feel the negative emotions in other people. So if somebody starts emoting and starts losing the head, shouting and screaming because something goes wrong in the workplace, we feel their anger, we feel their fear, we feel the fear of the other people that are directing that anger at, and it has a negative impact that drives us away and drives us into threat mode. So one of the critical things we can learn is how to manage our emotions under pressure. Now, there's only so much you can do in a couple of minutes as a bullet point in a session like this, but I'm going to give you a simple technique that can help. But I want you to know, in the program we're doing in the last quarter, we do a module all on resilience and managing emotions under pressure. And in the first quarter next year, we're doing a full 4-week program on resilience. But I want you to imagine that it's next time that you are in that situation where you're just about to blow, where, you know, my mom always says that bad things happen in threes. And let's say the 5th one has just happened and you're just pulling your hair out and you're just ready to explode and you're thinking, oh God, I'm going to kill somebody. What do? Let me give you a simple intervention that I borrowed from a program from the Search Inside Yourself Institute. And they are the institute that grew out of Google, who do a mindfulness leadership program. And they have a simple 3-breath exercise that is really, really powerful. And it's one of the most highly rated exercises each time we do that program, we deliver that program. And it involves just 3 breaths. You can take 3 breaths in a minute or a minute and a half, okay? Why don't you do this with me? So you can do it right now, despite the fact that you're not ready to blow. But let's say next time you feel that you're ready to blow, one of the things that you need to do is pause things. Because things happen when I screamed earlier on, if you got triggered by your emotional brain, you see that things happen very, very quickly. You may have jumped in your seat or your heart may have started beating a little bit faster. And the challenge is not to react when you're under the pressure of that emotional brain. So it's about slowing things down. So next time you realize that you're coming under more and more stress, here's what I suggest. Just first, take a breath and just pay attention to that breath. So why don't you do that now? Why don't we do it together? So let's take a long, deep breath in, paying attention to it. Noticing it going in and noticing it going out. 1 breath. And then the second breath. As you breathe in, simply relax your body. If your shoulders are high, let them droop. If you're holding your fists clenched, unclench them. If your jaw's clenched, unclench it. If you've got wrinkles on your forehead, just let it go. Just let yourself relax. And then in the third breath, as you're breathing in, you think, what is my best self? How would I show up here if I was being my best self? What does my best self do in that situation? Now, let me tell you, there are going to be situations where even if you engage this, that you're still going to go off and it's not going to be your best self you're going to deploy. You may still lose the head. But just bringing attention to it, starting that process, develops the capability over time to be able to recognize when there's an onset of this sort of pressure, to take a few breaths to give you a little bit of space. And sometimes when you get to that point where you say, what would my best self do in this situation? You may not know. And that might be a signal that says, maybe now is not the time to react. Maybe now is not the time to make that decision. Maybe I need to give myself space. Guys, I need to get away for 15 minutes. Give me a few minutes. I just need to think about this. Or if it's a conversation you're having with yourself where you're getting stressed, maybe you need to say, you know what, I'm going to park this and I'm going to think about it tomorrow. But 3 simple breaths. 1, paying attention to the breath. 2nd, just relaxing the body. And the 3rd one, what would my best self do in this situation? Powerful, powerful way of dealing with those sort of moments when you feel yourself really under pressure. So I shared with you 6 ideas there. And what I would say to you is think about them and think which one really felt right for you. Maybe there were 2 of them. Which ones really felt like the ones you need to focus upon? And I'm going to ask you in a few moments to set an intention. And setting an intention is very easy. It's just I'm setting an intention. I'm deciding that I am going to do this. I'm going to show up as my best self. I'm going to, each time I meet people, I'm going to just take a beat and tune in and call out how I see them, how I feel that they might be feeling, and so on. So while you're thinking about that, let me tell you that these are not a magic wand. You look at these and you say, God, they're awfully simple, Deiric. They're really, I was expecting something a little bit more complex. Maybe something as complex and as secret as the formula for Pepsi or Coca-Cola or something, or the meaning of life. And the reality is that these tiny, tiny little changes are the things that make all the difference in the world. But you know what? I've said it a few times, but consistency is critically important. It's not how big the tool is. It's not how big the behavior is. It's how consistently it's applied in situations where it matters. Now, there's a man who's much more eloquent than I am who talks about this. And I'm going to put on a piece of video from him now in a moment. It's only about 90 seconds long. And, do you love your... I want to go away from that because I need to make sure that you have sound. So let me just share that. You share. And share the computer sound. There we go. Share. So let me let him talk. And by the way, if you're in a place where the connection is a little bit flaky, don't worry. There are subtitles, so you'll get the gist of it. And I'll tell you where to find the piece afterwards. So let me let you have 90 seconds of Simon Sinek.
Do you love your wife? Yes. Prove it. Like, what's the metric? Give me the number that helps me know. Right? Because when you met her, you didn't love her. Now you love her, right? Tell me the day the love happened. It's an impossible question. But it's not that it doesn't exist. It's that it's much easier to prove over time, right? Well, leadership is the same thing. It's about transitions. So if you were to go to the gym, it's like exercise, right? If you go to the gym and you work out and you come back and you look in the mirror, you will see nothing. And if you go to the gym the next day and you come back and you look in the mirror, you will see nothing, right? So clearly there's no results, can't be measured, it must not be effective. So we quit, right? Or if you fundamentally believe that this is the right course of action and you stick with it, like in a relationship, I bought her flowers and I wished her happy birthday, and she doesn't love me. Clearly I'll give up. That's not what happens. If you believe there's something there, you commit yourself to an act of service. You commit yourself to the regime, the exercise. You can screw it up. You can eat chocolate cake one day. You can skip a day or two. You know, it allows for that. But if you stick with it consistently, I'm not exactly sure what day, but I know you'll start getting into shape. I know it. And the same with the relationship. It's not about the events. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency, right?
And there is the core message. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. You pick any one of those behaviors and you set an intent now. And just by saying, it is my plan, it is my intent to change this way, this aspect of the way I show up, you set into action a whole load of brain processes to start moving you down that road. But you have to believe that this is worth doing and this is important. So what I would say to you is, if there's anything I've said, any of those behaviors where you say, you know what, I think that would make a difference. I think that could have an impact over time. Well, then don't wait until later. Set an intention to start changing it right now. So set that intent that says, I am going to, moving forward, invest in being just a little bit different. And if you need to look over the recording again to see which ones of those you choose, we're going to be sending that recording to you afterwards. Now, for those of you who have completed an assessment, you're in a great situation because this tells you how other people see you show up already. It's a great starting point. And that's why we gave you the gift of it. It normally costs a couple $100 to go through one of these assessments. And this is going to give you a snapshot of how do other people see you show up. And when Aoife sends it out, she'll also send out something called a development tips workbook, which will give you some suggestions on how you can start to raise your performance. And how you can start to other ideas that you can use to not your performance, but to change the way you show up and your behaviors. So before I go to Q&A, and as I leave you with that thought that really set yourself an intention, I just wanted to mention something else. And I alluded to it at the beginning of the session. And that is this session, which is coming down the track. We start sending out the invitations tomorrow for a start in, I think, the 3rd week of October. And again, it's a no cost, it's a 4-week program, and it'll focus in the first week on getting your vision together. It'll focus on the 2nd week on what do you do when the wheels come off and the vision doesn't work. It'll focus on the 3rd week on the power of gratitude. And then it'll focus in the last week on pulling that all together for a great 2020. And we're going to give you a free app that's going to help you to work through that. So watch out for that. And don't worry about being invited. The fact that you're on the list for this one means that you're going to be invited anyway. So that's coming. And then I know a couple of people that are on here are thinking about becoming certified practitioners for Genos. And one of the advantages of becoming a certified practitioner is we take all of the materials from all of these programs and we put them into an online system called Genos University. We give the decks, we give the materials, we give the recordings and so on and so forth so that you can use those with your clients. That actually begins next week. Is it next week or week after? I think it's next week. Aoife will remind me when she comes back on. But so with that said, let me bring Aoife on and see what questions you had. And maybe you can just correct me, Aoife. What date are we starting the
certification? Is September 11th.
September 11th. Sorry about that.
Yep.
So, yes. So any questions?
As of right now, we don't. So if you do have any, folks, please feel free to chat them in. We'll give it a couple minutes. We did have one person, Deiric, make a nice connection there to I See You, like in the movie Avatar.
Ah, yeah. In fact, you know what's very interesting? Who made the connection? Who was that?
It was. Let me see. Oh. Not working. You
know who you are. You know what's really interesting about that? That was inspired by that Sobona. That's exactly where it was lifted from. And you're right. I forgot about that dimension. Isn't it?
Who was Sylvie Aubert.
Sylvie. Yeah, Sylvie. And it was so in that movie, man, it was when somebody said, I see you. Mm-hmm. It kind of blew you away. Even though they were strange looking creatures, it kind of had that impact. And it does have that impact, just seeing people, letting them know that you see them. Now, I'm not suggesting you walk up tomorrow to somebody and say, I see you. Yeah, that just out. That sounds a little bit like I know what you did last summer. Other question.
Okay, yeah, we have one coming in. What do you think is the best way to garner support from leadership to get on the positivity bandwagon? I can make changes with my teams, but how do I get the folks above me on board?
Yeah, that's a super question. There are two answers to that. And the first one is you have to become the ambassador of positivity. Now, it sounds to me like you're already doing that and you're already bringing your team on board. And over time, unfortunately, it's over a period of time, that may be noticed and people may notice the impact and the results that you're getting and start to tune into it, or maybe they won't. If you want to convince people over to this way of thinking who are just not wired that way and just don't think that way, I think you need to go at it from an evidence perspective. And that is by sharing with them, hey, here's some of the research I've uncovered. Let me show you some of this research from Losada and Barbara Fredrickson and so on. And let me tell you, actually, I just thought while we were talking. Oh man, I just realized we have something really exciting coming down the track for you after our conference. But there is, make sure our conference takes place, don't be jealous, in Hawaii in 2 weeks' time. Somebody has to do it. And at that, we're launching something for our partners and for our clients that is designed to measure how positive a workplace is, and to look at what level of positive sentiment there is. And associated with that is a huge amount of research that shows that positive environments have more engaged people. So here's what I suggest to whoever asked that question. Please ask us again towards the end of September. And what we'll do, and we'll do it for everybody that's on here, is we'll give you access to a survey that will allow you to go into your company and take the pulse of how positive the organization is right now. And we'll give you some slides for communicating back to people. Here's how positive it is. Here's how you could change how positive it is. And here's the potential impact upon engagement. In fact, that might be a very good session for us to do, AFA, after we come back from the conference.
Definitely.
So whoever asked the question, anybody else that's interesting, reach out to us, because we're developing this new survey, and it's been designed to be delivered at no cost. Now, I can't tell you any more, or I'd have to kill you. But bottom line is, people who don't think that way and haven't been exposed to this, they need to see the research. And come back to us the end of September, and I think we'll have something that will allow you to be able to communicate that very effectively indeed.
Perfect. Thanks, Deiric. Another question there. How can we be consistent to change or improve our behaviors? Any guidance there?
Yeah, I can. First, two things. The first thing is, don't try to take on too much. Okay. I would say change your behavior. I would say why not pick from those behaviors the one that resonates most with you? Okay? Because let me tell you that if you change anything about the behaviors and the way you interact with people, you change any one behavior, it actually necessitates changing them all. If you become more aware of being your best self, that means that you automatically start tuning in and seeing people more effectively. It means you become more authentic. It means you tend to become more positive. If you, for example, start to see people more effectively using the approach I've used, that means that you have to become more self-aware in order to be aware of others, and so on. And here's my point. So one is, just pick one of those and set the intent. And set the intent just means, I am going to, from this point forward, show up slightly differently. And you can put something in your diary that says, don't forget your intent. Don't forget to show up in this manner. And the second thing I would do is I would think, where are the triggers where you really know that you need to change things? What are the things that trigger you into a behavior that you don't care for, that doesn't serve you well? So just think, what are the situations? And once again, in that situation, say, I'm setting an intent that when this happens next time, here's the way I'm going to react. So I think it's more a question of not giving yourself too much to do, first off. And secondly, identifying what is it that you specifically want to change. The third thing I would say to you is, just by sitting on this session, you've already changed things a little bit. I say this all the time, and apologies for quoting him. I quote him probably on every seminar I ever do, but there's a man called Fritz Perls. He was one of the leading lights in the Gestalt psychology movement. And he said, awareness is curative. The moment you become aware, you become a little bit better. The moment you're aware, you're not showing up very empathetically. If you want to, you become more aware. So if you just decide, you look today and you said, there's something here I'd like to change, set an intent, and it's already changed. Okay.
Great, thanks, Deiric. One other question, how do you tackle what I think is a skewed methodology of never mentioning when someone leaves the workplace on either good or bad terms? Refraining from the mention is sometimes taken away as that not to talk about something negative.
Yeah, people, there are two reasons why sometimes that happens. One is the mafia reason, you're dead to us. When you leave the club type of thing, you leave us, you're no longer alive. It's like the old mafioso, you leave the family and you're on the outside. We don't talk to you anymore. We pass you in the street. And the second reason, as you say, is because of the misapprehension that that is going to upset people. Here's the reality. If somebody is in the workplace today and they're gone tomorrow and we say nothing about it, their imaginations create much worse stories about what happened than the truth can ever be in most situations. So my inclination would be to prick that up and to, as honestly, without betraying somebody's confidence, let people know, why did somebody move on? And by the way, if they moved on because, and I mean this with all due respect to anybody out there, I don't mean to be harsh. If they moved on because you got a crap workplace, well then hell, you need to do something about that, because you don't want that happening. So in the beginning, it's I think you have to put a name on it, because people's imaginations will create much worse situations than you can possibly imagine. You're not protecting people by not telling them. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, thanks, Deiric. And we just have 1 or 2 comments coming in. Thank you so much for your gift. It makes me think, and I will work on attitude number 3 right now. I would love to learn more about resilience. We've had a few people message in about the resilience program.
Great.
I'm very excited about that one. We will invite everyone that has attended this session to that course. And then just one other, sorry, my screen is stuck here. We just had 1 other comments coming in, Deiric. Sorry, I can't scroll down, from Linda saying, thank you for offering us more at no cost. So valuable. I'm much appreciated. I'm very interested in learning more about resilience. I do hope to become a certified trainer one day.
Great, good, Jen. We'd delighted to have you. Yeah.
So that's all we have for now, Deiric. Folks, if you do have other questions that come in later on, you can feel free to send them over to us. I think you all have my email from the messages we sent out before this session. So let us know if you have any other questions. We'll also be sending you a link so you can join our LinkedIn group, as we mentioned earlier, and we encourage you to ask questions and collaborate with other members in there as well.
Great, good.
We just said I would love to. Thank you. Just comments. Sorry, Deiric, if you can you scroll down to the last couple there that just came in? My computer seems to be
completely screen is frozen, has it?
Yeah.
Thank you for all your time. I'm looking forward to being involved in more sessions, looking at being a certified trainer. Great. Thank you so much. Great as always. Thank you, Diego. Great as always. I love that. We've all got it. Would like to know more about resilience. There's a thank you at the end for Willem. So as Aoife says, we're delighted to, any questions, anything we can help with, reach out to us. And don't be surprised, tomorrow, we'll be reaching out again and starting to send out invitations. So you'll see the invitation for the next session coming along. So in the meantime, thank you for taking the time. I'm really delighted by the comments, because an old boss of mine, you probably heard me say this before you've been on a session, used to say, if you charge people money for a session, you're taking away something that they can get more of. There's lots of it in the world. May not seem like that sometimes, but if you take away their time, you take away something they'll never get back, and you have an even bigger responsibility to them. So I'm taking from the comments that at least some of you found that you got return on that investment. And for that, I'm really grateful. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for coming along again to the folks who have been here before. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye, folks.